What's up, everyone, and welcome to the 38th episode of the Control Freak Podcast. I am your host, Alex Blackard, or at LessAlex on Twitch and Twitter. Make sure to go follow me over there. Today, we are joined by returning guest Zach Allen, who just last weekend at SCG Philly won the whole damn thing with his teammates, Jan Jessup and Harlan Fear. How's it going, Zach?
Good, man. Happy to be back.
Absolutely. This is third time you've been on, right? Third time.
Is it the third time?
I
believe you. I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But yeah, today we're going to be talking about that tournament. We're going to be talking about the state of standard because as we're recording this, Worlds is going on, and Blue White Control, spoiler alert, is in the finals, Paulo Vitor Damaderosa. But before we get into everything, just want to shout out the sponsor of the podcast, Team Solitary Pro, and of course all the amazing patrons over at patreon.com/LessAlex. If you enjoy this kind of content and the podcast, head on over there and consider becoming a patron. Shouting out the newest patrons, Renee B and Ryan K. Thank you for your support. And just as a reminder, you can find the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and basically everywhere else that you would be able to find a podcast. And head on over to Apple Podcasts, give it a 5-star review. All right, now that that's all over with, let's go over a review of what we're going to be talking about today. Again, we're going to be talking about SCG Philly. We're going to be talking about standard, the state of standard, and the Worlds tournament that's going on right now. Maybe it'll finish by the time we're in the middle of this. And then we're going to be talking Pioneer and a bit of Modern. So, yeah, you know the deal. You know I don't like to waste too much time other than that lengthy intro. SCG Philly, your team won.
Yep.
Take us through that tournament and really kind of dig us into what happened. How did you do personally? How'd the team do?
Yeah, sure. So, going into Philly, all three of me, Harlan, and Dan had played Standard the week before at, I believe it was SCG Richmond.
All right.
It was a new Standard format. My team actually did the worst despite being a good team. Harlan top-aided and Dan got 10th, I believe.
Nice.
And my team did not day two in a field full of a lot of teams that day two'd, but I had been playing my deck on Arena all week. I knew that, my deck was just in a really good spot. It just felt really good. I was just winning a lot. I told my teammates, I'm like, hey, I know the results don't look as good as they could have, but
Yeah.
you gotta, keep in mind the other, successes I've been having with the deck, how good it is. Asked them to trust me on it.
Yeah.
They did. And, credit to them for, trusting me despite the results not being that great. I did end up winning the Classic the week before.
Yeah.
Playing Blue-White. So it wasn't like I, didn't win at all, that type of situation. But, yeah, so, I asked them to trust me. They let me play Standard. Harlan had played 0 Modern since the banning of Opal and...
wow.
And Oko, I think, was Oko banned then, or was it?
Yeah,
both?
Opal,
It was at the same
Oko,
time.
and Lattice were all
Lattice,
the
okay,
same
sure,
banning. Yeah.
Yep. So he played 0 Modern since that banning, and just kind of said he was just going to ask Ely for his list, play Ely's list, and
Sure.
we were all happy with that because we just know Harlan's great.
Absolutely.
And Dan had played a little bit of Pioneer, but not not as much as you would like for someone playing your Pioneer seed. But Dan's also just an incredibly good player, so
Right.
it's not even like we're not worried about him. And he just said, he's testing online. He likes his Sultai deck. It looks like his type of deck. And it just won the European PT the week before. So
Yeah. Yeah, the Swedish Sultai list, yeah.
yep. So he jams that, and then we get to the event, and I just knew that my deck was incredible. Like I had won the Classic the week before,
Yeah.
and everyone saw me win the Classic and saw Corey win the actual event with his blue-white version.
Yeah, and that was the main event was a team tournament as well, so.
Yes. But everyone saw Corey win like a bigger event, right?
Right.
And people were trying out both of our lists, and multiple streamers, for whatever reason, tried both of our lists and said they liked Corey's better.
Okay,
Uh,
interesting.
which is, that's
They,
fine. Like, his deck is certainly better in some metagames, right? But
it,
I knew that my deck beat Corey's deck really badly because
sure,
I
in the
was,
mirror match, yeah.
yep, I was really high. I had more counter magic. I was really high on Castle Ardenvale, which is like incredibly powerful in control mirrors.
Do you think that folks saying that is kind of a little bit of like results bias? Like, oh, he won the bigger tournament, so his list must be better. Like, just maybe subconscious, like on a subconscious level.
I don't think it's subconscious as much as like they were playing, like the people playing both decks were playing like on Arena where they play against red all the time, that type of
Right.
thing, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
his deck is better against red than mine was. Like, it was better, but I knew that that didn't really matter. Like, what mattered was, uh, like, being better against red didn't matter. What mattered was winning the mirror, because the
Right.
mirror was, blue white's the best deck.
Yeah.
And blue white is so good that, like, even if you have a worse red matchup, if you play the deck good enough, you can still beat it. Like, you can still beat everything else. So I was like, in my mind, like, the only thing that mattered was winning this mirror. I'm just going to try and win this mirror.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And we get to the event. Flash forward, in the event, I end up winning. I went 14-1-1 on the weekend with it.
Jeez, that's pretty
Yeah,
impressive.
Blue White was just incredibly well positioned. Like, people weren't coming with enough tech for it. There was all this talk about Teamer Reclamation being better for some reason.
Yeah.
People are more prepared for the tap out Blue White version than my, like, counter spell. I don't even have that many more counter spells, but it was a little counter heavier.
Sure.
And people just, like, I think there's a pretty big disparity in Blue White with how good, how the matchup feels when you're playing against someone who's just kind of like picking up Blue White versus, someone who's
Right.
got a lot of reps with Blue White and understands all the lines they're supposed to take, that type of thing.
Sure.
So, what ends up happening is I play against a bunch of people that didn't have enough sideboard cards for me, and then they got punished pretty bad for it.
Yeah.
Understandable, but it worked out for me, so.
Yeah, I mean 14-1-1, that's that's nuts.
Yeah.
So cool. So, I feel like there's a lot of folks, because team tournaments are relatively new to Magic. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 years they've really been picking up popularity in the last few years. What are your thoughts on team tournaments compared to just traditional me versus you kind of tournaments?
Sure. Yeah, so team tournaments are interesting. There is so much, like, politicking and trying to get teams together,
Sure.
and, no one does it on the same timeline. It's not like the whole Magic community sits down on some day and we're all like, all right, we'll
Right.
pair off, get teams, right? So it's like, some people have time to get, a team for this one or not that one,
Yeah.
whatever it is. And so I don't know. It's rough putting together. There can be some feel bads there. There can be, some.
Yeah, like, oh, hey, I might be able to go. I'll probably be able to go. Oh, wait, I can't.
Yeah,
And then, like,
exactly.
you have to snub somebody else, or somebody's like, yo, I don't think I'll go. And then, like, wait, I can. We're teaming, right? So that kind
Yep.
of thing. Yeah, that makes sense. But just in terms of, like, the strategy, obviously it's a much different because you can help your teammates. There's absolutely no outside help in 1v1 tournaments. But can
Yeah.
you speak to that at all, or how do you like
Well,
it compared to regular tournaments?
So for me, it's interesting because there are teams I've had where helping somebody, or like your last player specifically, right? Like the last,
Yeah,
two people are done, one player's
yeah,
going.
and you'll
Feel
see
like
that
that.
a lot too.
Yeah.
Like the two players are huddled around the last match or whatever.
Yep. And that happens, but there's, I think when team tournaments were just getting started, there was a lot of like, do I keep this? Do I mold this? Do I, like, what do you like this line? All of that.
Right.
And I think there's more of a consensus coming around where, at least for good teams, if you have to ask if it's a really tough line, that type of
Right.
thing, you want your teammate's opinion, you do ask, that's fine. But you have to understand when you're asking questions about something, anything, even when you call a judge, like in single player, you're
Sure.
giving your opponent some amount of information. Like, and this happens to me all the time too. Like even when I'm playing just individual tournaments, if my opponent calls a judge at any point, it pretty much tells me one of the cards in their hand,
Right, right,
or
right.
they're asking some interaction, whatever, right? But so like in team tournaments, we have this like it's not a rule, but we have this situation going on, if you will, where it's almost better to just never talk to each other at all. Like talking keeper moles, that's fine. I mean
Sure.
that's not really giving away information. It is to some extent. Like you might talk about a hand and then your opponent knows your land light and then they'll like counter your Bertha Meletus or something. You know what I mean?
Sure,
But
yeah.
like so we found that it was just better to just trust your teammate, let them do their thing, and only ask in really dire situations, basically.
Right.
And that's how we basically approach the matchup. It's been,
Okay.
mostly fine to do it that way. Stuff has worked out. So, and that's been, I mean, that's, my team's won 2 of the events this year.
Yeah.
Not trying to brag, but that's basically
No,
been our
I mean-
secret the whole time, was just that.
Brag away, well deserved.
Yeah, fair. But yeah, I mean, that was basically the secret the whole time, was just we were never really asking each other stuff. We had one rule on the team, and it was if you ever asked if you needed to mulligan, you're mulliganing. That was just the rule.
Okay, that's
If
fair.
you ever have to ask, it's an auto mull.
Yeah. And that's
Uh,
interesting that you say that too about the information, because actually, I don't know if you remember this, but the first time you were on the podcast, you spoke a lot to for becoming a better player, becoming a better control player, the information game. So that's what it all comes back to, even in team tournaments, is if you have to ask your friend, hey, and if you point to a card and you like kind of flip up one of your cards, and you kind of make this movement, that's giving away quite a bit, because that means you obviously have some kind of interaction or removal or something. So
Yep.
It's very, very interesting to me, and I think very helpful. It's all about the information game. I love that is your first thought and the first thing that your mind goes to, because it is something that I feel like a lot of players just don't even think about,
Yeah, I mean, very often people don't ask, which is, understandable. Like, maybe you're not supposed to ask, or whatever. But, yeah, I would say there's like a counterpoint to this too, right? Where like you can bluff, right? Like you could say, hey, like should I do this here or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And people will generally be like, like that's something you can do, but nobody ever bluffs. That just doesn't happen very often. So, I think that's a counter that people can make, but it's just not really super realistic, I guess. Like it just doesn't happen very much.
Right.
So yeah, I mean that's.
No, I mean that's huge too. So overall, you think that the best practice is to just kind of play your own game, and in dire straits, in a real close game, then if need be, then ask your teammates.
Yeah, I mean that's generally my philosophy, and I think that's how we've basically approached it for as long as we've been approaching it. Was that if they have to ask. I mean, if you have to ask and you really are struggling on a decision, you should ask. Like it's not the end of the world to give away some information. Sometimes they won't get it, that type of thing. But for the most part, it's just better overall if you just don't, right?
Yeah, no, exactly.
And that's where just like the having good teammates comes in, where it's like you see good teams win a lot, and it's because they can trust each other. They don't have to ask questions. They just play.
Oh yeah, and I think
I
think with these team tournaments too, especially, at the SCGs and GPs and everything, the teams that have the best players typically, do the best. I mean, obviously that's true, but like in a 1v1 tournament, a player can get lucky and rattle off several wins in a row. It really, and this is something too, because in St. Louis we had a team tournament series, so it was pretty interesting to see how people would construct their teams. But speaking to your point, it's really important to like pick your team and would you suggest picking your team ahead of before, like trying to get the team assembled, trying to get the Avengers assembled as soon as possible, as soon as you can, because all of those changes can happen, and I mean, I'm sure you don't want the feel bads.
Yeah, I mean, you do want to do it as quickly as possible, right? Like, I would never argue that, but no, I think it's just a huge advantage to actually have your team ahead of time, and
Right.
that's actually something like so. The week before this one, I was teaming with some people from Team RIW,
Sure.
and I was not teaming with Dan or Harlan. They had their own teams; they're doing their own thing. But even while they're doing their own thing, testing with their own teams, we were in a group chat discussing, formats, what decks we like. If we think this like X deck is well positioned, then should like this person play that deck? Should they start to learn it? And I think that's important because, and that's not even just like to better players. Like that's everybody. It's like if you can get some extra time with your deck, you can kind of learn
Yeah.
your format a little better. Figure out the meta game. How to choose it, all that type of stuff. It is an advantage to just have like a format specialist in those seats, and you'll often actually see that in these team tournaments where good teams do well, but then the teams that aren't more well known that actually do well are because they have a bunch of people really prepared for their format.
Yeah.
And even if even if you're a worse player overall than Paulo Vitor, right?
Yeah.
You might be more practiced in Modern than he is, and like you sit down against him in an event and you might just understand the matchup a little better because he's out practicing a bunch of stuff. And obviously it's an
Right.
extreme example, like he's one of the best in the world, but
Right.
it carries over where it's like even if someone's a slightly better player than somebody else in general, they might be worse in X format. So getting your team together, figuring out what the formats you want to play, the decks, and then getting reps in just can be a big advantage.
Oh, absolutely. Nothing beats actually playing the games for sure.
Yep.
Cool. So talking about, we're going to shift gears here, talk about the state of Standard. So obviously Worlds is going on as we're recording this. Do you have it up? I know they did that. It just got tied up.
Yeah, PV is up a game in the third set.
Oh,
currently.
okay. So if he wins, it's over, and he
Yep,
is.
he's
the
got to
world
win
champion.
one of the next two, and he's got it.
Gotcha. So that he is playing blue-white control too. So,
He is playing blue. Yep.
but in terms of the world's meta, the world championship meta game, do you think that's going to affect SCGs? I assume it's going to affect like LGSs, FNMs, stuff like that. But do you think it'll affect the meta game of the SCG at all, or just probably
there's not standard events coming up for a while.
Yeah.
I don't even think there's standard classics. I think a bunch of the next SCGs are like, I think they're just Pioneer and then like Modern Classics and maybe a Pioneer Classic too. So I think in general, yeah, there's not there's not a lot of standard coming up at SCGs, but I think like if there was an event next weekend, it'd still be in a pretty weird spot because like the world's list are happening right now and people look at Nicola, right? But the world's list got submitted like before I submitted my deck for SCG Philadelphia, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So like it's good players, playing good decks. These decks are like semi-current, but they're not as current as other decks, I guess.
Right. That's a fair point.
That is a pretty weird spot to be in where it's like, they like more people are watching this. They're going to think this is the pinnacle of the metagame, but realistically, like in terms of the arena metagame, this is like a metagame from 10 days ago, whereas like my event was 7 days ago or something like that, right?
And it's so interesting to me, and we don't talk on this podcast a lot about standard, but obviously we're going to talk about it today. You just won the Open and everything, but it's really interesting to me how all of the best players have really, on Moto, there's no standard. It's so hard to find a standard queue. And on Arena, that's where all the best players are playing now. So it's interesting to me how that paradigm has shifted over the last year and a half or so. Obviously,
I don't play standard at all on Moto anymore. It's just not worth it. You just get better games in playing on Arena.
Yeah.
In my opinion, you play against better competition. The games go quicker. The interface is slightly better. The rewards are less, but that is just something you deal with. So
Yeah.
I mean that's
Yeah, it's just I just wanted to point it out because of how that paradigm has shifted over the last, I don't know, year and a half, basically since it got out of open beta, basically.
sure.
So very interesting. So obviously blue-white control. How do you think it's positioned in standard right now? Do you think it is the best deck?
Oh, I think it's the best deck by a lot, and
Okay.
it's interesting at this Pro Tour how few, or the Worlds, I guess, how few
Yeah.
pros actually played it.
It was
Because
interesting to me. There was what? It was like a very small percentage in the metagame.
yeah, and I thought that was very strange because I do think that blue white is the best deck. But you see Paulo play it, and obviously he knows what's up. He's not
Yeah.
playing a bad deck, and
Right.
it's working out for him. So I think it's a pretty accurate description of where the metagame was last week in terms of this week. I think Arena's past this, and people are starting to tech for blue white. Blue white's getting harder to win with.
Right.
And even if it is the best deck in the format right now, I don't think it necessarily will be going forward. So yeah, I mean that's just kind of where I'm at with it. I do believe it's the best deck at the moment, and it just has some really, really powerful cards that people are still learning how to play against. So
Right. I mean,
we'll see if they figure out the tech.
the first time I casted the Elspeth denies
Carter's
death.
Death?
Yeah. Oh my god. I was like, this, you don't lose. You just can't lose.
That card's really absurd. It's honestly one of my favorite cards in Standard too. Like, I just put it in my cube.
Oh, nice.
I called it like when I read it. I read it. And I immediately posted on Twitter. I was like, I don't think anybody's talking about this card.
Yeah,
But
I actually remember that tweet. That's
yeah, I was like, I think this is one of the best cards in the entire set, and people just don't know that yet.
Yeah.
And it ended up being that way. So
Yeah, I mean, spot on.
yeah, got rewarded for it, I guess.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Cool. So, moving forward, obviously, metagame's going to shift a little bit.
Mhm.
We know that, but what are blue white's good matchups in standard?
Blue white is honestly very good versus everything. So blue white is, but like it sounds like a little pretentious, right? But it's more just like the truth that blue white is just in this spot where it's like good against everything. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So it's in this like best deck situation, if you will, which is something that standard decks get into fairly often.
Oh yeah.
Right. Where it's like red black vehicle, or I don't know if it's vehicles, but like red black artifact when Hazard was still around.
Yeah.
Like they get in these best deck situations, and what that kind of means is that, it is the best deck, and nothing naturally has a good matchup against it. Like nothing's necessarily favored, so every other deck is trying to figure out how to beat it.
Yeah.
And they're all, adding more sideboard cards, all tuning their main decks more. And we're just in the middle of that process right now. But, what it kind of means is that blue-white, is starting to get attacked. And while it's still the best deck, it's definitely worse than it was. Like, it's much worse than it was.
Sure. And, I mean, if you are trying to attack, and this is traditionally true all the time in standard, if you're trying to beat the best deck by not playing the best deck, you're making your deck worse against the other decks, right? So
yeah, that's mostly true, but that gets kind of offset in some regard by the fact that like you play against blue white more, right? Like more people pick up blue white, so it's like, yeah, you're a little bit worse against other decks. As long as you have a plan, you can figure it out. If you're playing against blue white in 33% of your matchups or whatever, and you have a good plan for them, you got a bunch of sideboard cards, you ready to beat them, like you can still win the event that way.
Yeah, as long as your deck has good cards in it and good synergies, it should be good. I
actually have a very good example of that.
Yeah, sure.
From when I back to the red black metagame when red black was the best deck. I actually ended up top 8ing a Grand Prix playing Esper Control in that format. And if it's old now, but if you go back and look at the list, I had already tuned my main deck to be good against Esper and red black, and then post board I had 7 cards to bring in, and it was like it was always like a struggle. It's like I have so many cards for this matchup. Like, what am I supposed to cut? So it was like I actually had a different, play versus draw plan against them, and
Oh wow.
I had extra sideboard cards for the play, and then extra sideboard cards for the draw, and it ended up working out for me. I did pretty good in that event. But that's kind of the spots you get into with best deck formats, I guess.
Yeah, and I feel like, especially, I mean, 2018 was, a very best deck time, just with Oko and all that nonsense. But
Standard just kind of gets into that spot anyway. Like that is just something that's just like a common occurrence of Standard, I guess you could say.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah.
well, so I was going to ask you what the bad matchups are, but you're telling me there are no bad matchups.
Well, there aren't bad matchups, but there are a lot of matchups that are close. And I think it is like a 3-deck metagame where it's red, teamer, and blue white.
Yeah.
I guess we might see more fires now, but I think that teamer and blue white both, teamer and blue white both kind of beat fires. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but I think that's where we're at. And blue white is like 50-50 against both teamer and red, but like you can be 55, like you're 55 against one and 50 against the other, and you can kind of choose which one that is at any time, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And like if you look at Corey's list, he was like 55 against red, 50 against teamer. My list was more 55 against teamer, 50 against red.
Yeah, flip-flopped, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is play blue-white, but be prepared to feel the hate, to feel people teching against it.
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, again, congrats on your big win, and definitely, what's your next event?
I am playing a Pioneer Open, I guess you would say, at SCG Indianapolis in like 5 days from now or 6 days from now.
That's coming up. I'm actually going to be at that too, so I'll see you there.
Oh, heck yeah, man.
Maybe you'll teach me how to play Love Letter or something.
Oh, sure.
Cool.
Always into play some Love Letter.
Like I said, I still haven't gotten around to playing it yet. So we are going to switch gears though, and there were two kind of important Pioneer tournaments on Magic Online, and we're going to talk about those here. So the Pioneer Premiere was on February 16th, which is today. Just got finished. So this, I mean, Dimir Inverter. This deck is just everywhere. Is it safe to say that this is the best deck?
Yeah, it's the best deck. I'm playing it next weekend.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, this deck, I played it one night on stream, and I had never played it before, and just went 4-1 like willy nilly. Like, I mean, it seems very good. Of course,
it's too good. Something needs to be banned from it. And I talk about bans, but I like to think that like even when I talk about them, I'm pretty like even keeled on them, where it's like, if I think something needs to be banned, I'll say it, but like I'll talk about a ban and say this doesn't need to be banned right now, we can wait when it doesn't. And
right,
both this deck and Lotus Breach are just too good. Like you play other decks against them, and you can just tell that your deck is worse power level than the deck you're playing against, and that's just true. For both of those decks, like you play against, like, some of the things that these decks are doing are just way too powerful for what's allowed in the format. Yeah. And even like, I've tested Sultai, I've tested some other stuff, but like blue-black can just play this stall game, just interact with you a little bit, and then all of a sudden the game's just over, and you just never were in it. Exactly. You never had a chance,
Yeah, and of course people are saying that it's very Splinter Twin-esque, which, I mean, to an extent, it definitely is. Obviously, no flash here, but I mean,
it's interesting. Like, I actually like how interesting it is with Inverter. Inverter is actually a very interesting card where it's like, you got to make this decision of, can I play it right now? Like, can I shuffle my graveyard in? All of that. Like, it leads to a lot of very interesting and weird situations, and I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
But it at the same time is just like, I don't know, just the fact that it gets to play Dig Through Time is just too absurd. Where like,
and
Dig Through Time
so
enables the combo and finds it all on the same card, and then when you like transition away from this combo spot, it's still just like the best thing you can, like, you know what I mean? Like, the transition into being a control deck, it's still like the best card in your deck in that scenario.
Yeah, and I mean, of course, people are saying that this is going to be the deck that gets Dig Through Time banned. We will see.
It should.
I
It
mean,
should probably get Dig Through Time banned. You could ban Inverter. I think that's fine, but I do feel like this is the deck that should get Dig Through Time banned.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been on the chopping block since day one. Of course, it just, as a control player, it sucks because we're like casting this card for like 4 mana, which even still, that's very fun. I mean, that's a very good Magic card.
I actually think Dig Through Time getting banned is good for control. Believe it or not.
Do you want to speak to that for a second?
Sure. I mean, blue-white plays Dig Through Time because it's super powerful, right?
Absolutely.
But like you just said, like you're casting it for 4 mana because you're not a good Dig Through Time deck. Like you don't have a lot of stuff in your sideboard or like in your main deck that is cheap that fills the graveyard. You have to play enchantment-based removal, and in fact, the blue-white deck now plays a bunch of like cycling stuff just so it can kind of enable dig better, right?
Yeah, and Sinister Sabotage has upticked in popularity just because of that surveil.
Sure, yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, that all makes sense, but I don't know. The truth of the matter here is that like you're not a good Dig Through Time deck, and other decks do it better than you.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
if you couldn't play Dig Through Time, blue-white is a good Sphinx's Revelation deck. It is like a good, Glimmer of Genius, Gearhulk, whatever other card advantage you want to play. Like it is good at doing those things, but it is not good at, just doing the Dig Through Time thing, I guess.
No,
so,
I mean,
other decks not getting dig and you just having to play like the slightly worse card draw, it's just like on average makes your deck slightly better than other decks getting nerfed, I guess.
Absolutely. So taking a look at these deck lists, though, just to run through them. First place was Son of Nothing in first place with Dimir Inverter. There was 3 Inverter decks and 1 Lotus deck in top 8 of this event.
Okay.
And then in second place, we have another Inverter deck. Third place was actually Blue-Green Ramp. So this is kind of like a callback to the old school. I say old school, but the format's brand new. But when the format was really starting to get solidified, things like Ugin, things like Imrakul promised in, and of course all the World Breakers and things like that. Obviously, Euro is just a lock in this deck. So that's third place. And then we do have a blue-white control here in fourth place. And boy, they are playing 8 Planeswalkers. 1 Elspeth, Sun's Nemesis, 1 Gideon of the Trials, which is excellent against the Inverter deck, 1 Narset, 2 Hero of Dominarias, and 3 Teferi Time Ravelers. And just as you mentioned, Torrential Gearhulk, which hasn't been seeing much love in control, but here it pops up as a one of. What do you make of this version of blue-white control?
I do think that I think that's kind of where blue needs to go. Like it needs to be more tap out based. Like mono black is just such a bad matchup for a deck that's like trying to use removal spells and counter magic.
Yeah.
And the powerful thing that this blue-white deck has going for it in, this format in general, where it doesn't have good cheap spells, basically, is that its Planeswalkers are so good. Like, that was the reason to play it anyway, was that you got to play Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. You get Narset. There's a bunch of other Planeswalkers, too. Teferi Time Raveler. There's a whole bunch of them. They're all good.
Yeah.
And that is just the strength of the deck. So why not, go that route? Why not, do the thing that's stronger for them?
Absolutely. And the list I'm playing currently, in terms of Planeswalkers, I'm actually playing the same Planeswalkers, but plus 1 Hero of Dominaria and minus 1 Time Raveler. So,
sure.
So, I mean, Gearhulk is interesting, though. It definitely great clock. It obviously pairs insane with Dig Through Time. Like, that's basically everything I want to do in Magic right there.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to me. Also, they're playing Settle the Wreckage in the main deck. Or in the sideboard, rather. And I think that's kind of to stifle mono black and the new mono white devotion decks that have been popping up. Obviously, that deck is just getcha very quick and doesn't even need the combo to kill you. And having Gideons, it's just really rough to get off the battlefield if you're blue-white.
Yep.
So in fifth place, was Niv Mizzet, 5-color Niv. So that deck is popping back up. It's interesting that a lot of these decks that we saw before Inverter meta are starting to pop back up. It's really interesting to me. Do you know why, or do you have any thoughts on why that might be?
Well, I think that people are still just going to play the deck they have. They're tuning them again to try and beat these best decks. Like once Eternal metagame is like there's like a clear best deck, or a clear best 2 decks, like whatever it is, right? Once you get into that spot, then it's easy to tune your decks to beat those 2 decks. Well, it's not easy, like they're still really good decks, right? But you get to play more sideboard cards for those decks. You get to know that like you can be less prepared for the other stuff because you might play against it once in the event or whatever. And I do think that helps fringe decks, have their sideboard plan be a little better. But at the same time, it is, I still think it's wrong to just not play, one of the 2 best decks. Like you can play the ones, and if you have experience playing them, it's just
sure.
It's going to be so much harder to win an event when your deck just isn't as powerful as these 2 decks. Because even when the match was bad, even when you have tough spots come up, you don't have the sideboard card for whatever matchup. Like these 2 decks just win easily because they're more proactive, they're faster than what they're playing against.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring the proposition of play the deck or play the best deck, because I actually put a poll up on my Twitter. And it was like almost 90% play the deck
Sure.
Which, I mean, I definitely agree with. I know blue-white. That is, I'm locking it in. Putting it on wax right here. I'm playing blue-white at Indy just because I have so much time with the deck, and it's what I'm most comfortable with. But I will admit that I've been tossing around the Lotus. I have that deck now in paper, so
okay.
I should probably keep it at home and not even throw it in the bag on the trip, but I know I am, and if I audible, I'm going to hate myself. But I think that deck's very good too. But Yama Killer here in 6th place with this mono white Heliod combo. So of course Heliod Sun Crown with Walking Ballista is the other boogeyman in the format that everyone was talking about before the set released, and it has taken a while, but it's finally starting to pop up in 5.0s and now in a premiere. So what do you think about this mono white devotion deck?
I think it's solidly in tier 1.5. I've actually been impressed by it playing against it. I don't think it's as good as the other 2 decks, but I do think it is good. So yeah, I mean, I could, I 100% think that, I think that it's a deck you can play. I think it's going to be tier 1 once something gets banned from these other 2 decks. But for now, I don't think it's as good as the other 2 decks, I guess.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. And they're playing main. Yama Killer played 2 main deck Rest in Peace, and yeah, that's pretty nuts.
That is wild.
Like the metagame is so warped that, or not. I don't want to be that hyperbolic, but at least Yama Killer believes, he's going to be expecting this deck, and he's still here, and apparently couldn't beat it because it won the tournament.
Yeah. I mean, and that's just like what you're going to see. Like you can play the other decks and they'll do well, but you're going to come up against a really good player playing the good deck, and if your draw is not perfect every time, which is just hard in Magic, you're going to lose. You're going to lose the best decks.
Yep, absolutely. So. In 7th place, we have another inverter deck here. And then we have in 8th place the good old-fashioned Lotus Breach. So, I mean, spot on.
Lotus Breach is so much better than people think. It's so frustrating to play against that deck, how easy it is for them to win off no resources. Like, they go from having just, like, a couple lands in play to top-decking Underworld Breach or Pour Over the Pages or any number of things, and all of a sudden you're just dead. It's super frustrating.
And it fights through the hate incredibly well.
The fact that it also is just an Ugin deck is just really absurd.
Yeah, it was crazy. I don't know if you watched the PT Phoenix, but LSV fought through 3 pieces of hate in a game and still just won. That
was Huey, but yeah.
Oh, was it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it was Huey. No, you're good.
Yeah, no. But yeah, I mean, it's very good, and that's why I got it. I love those kind of like weird, I don't really care about you. If I'm not playing control, I don't want to pay attention to you. Like when I'm playing control, I have to pay attention to what you're doing and
Yep.
reacting. So I love playing these storm style decks that just, yeah, do your thing. Unless you play something that's going to disrupt my combo, I'm just going to try and kill you on turn 3 or 4.
Sure.
And then in ninth place, we have another Heliod Sun Crown deck, Brazen Bar, and then in 10th place we have Spirit. So much more of the same in that tournament. And then we had the Modern Challenge the day before, and yeah. Do you want to talk about, you told me in the pre-show how you think Modern Blue White is pretty well positioned right now?
Yeah, I think blue decks in Modern are actually, very good. I'll say that I do think Amulet Titan is the best deck, just in a vacuum. But Amulet Titan is, it's a very finicky deck. It's really good against some strategies, and it's good at pushing some stuff out that just cannot hope to beat it.
Yeah.
And the decks that can beat it, blue is one of them, because Aether Gust plus Ashiok plus Mystic Sanctuary is this package that is just very good against Amulet Titan. It's very easy to it's finally possible for blue decks to play around Veil of Summer plus Cavern of Souls with Aether Gust. It's a spell that lets you interact without just like losing to an ETB trigger through those cards. And Ashiok is just like this like also milieu type thing that also beats, like kind of what they're doing is just this plan that actually works. And I do think Mystic Sanctuary is quickly becoming one of the better things in Modern. The first time I was on this cast, I said I didn't think it was that good.
Yeah, you did.
And boy, am I eating those words right now, because that land is so much better than it looks. Just and like you don't see this in Pioneer because there's less good cheap spells to get back, and
there's no fetch lands.
You can't fetch it exactly. Yeah. That's what it is. So in this, it's just like you get into a spot where you find you find one spell that's really good against some deck, right?
Sure.
Like Aether Gust against Amulet Titan, Path to Exile against humans, Verdict against humans, whatever it is, Cryptic Command against some deck, Dispel, whatever the spell is, you find some spell that's really good against that deck, and then you get to cast it like 3 or 4 turns in a row because of Mystic Sanctuary. And a lot of decks just don't beat that. They can't beat, you progressing your game plan, tempoing them out with the spell that's really good against them a few turns in a row, and then you get to the spot where maybe the first turn you just cast the Aether Gust. Second turn, you're probably just casting Aether Gust again. The third turn, maybe now you're playing like a Teferi Time Raveler and Aether Gusting them, or Stoneforge Mystic, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And you just put they just keep getting time walked by this land you have that just keeps getting back the perfect card in the matchup. So
yeah.
I do think blue decks are good in Modern. I don't think we know exactly what the best blue deck is. I think we're still experimenting. We're still gonna, work on finding it. But I think, in a few months we'll know, and blue will just be a tier 1 deck, whatever it is. Is it blue black? Is it blue white? Is it
sure?
Just whatever it is, right?
Yeah, and it always takes a while for if there is a control, and so for the listeners, this deck is a Stoneforge package deck, so it's not just hard control, but it is still, we still call it blue white X, blade or whatever, and so it does always take quite a bit of time to figure out really like the correct 65 to 70 cards, and then of course depending upon the tournament you can slot in the other 5 cards here and there. But yeah, I mean, of course all these decks will be in our show notes, and make sure to check those out if you want to dig into them deeper. I'm not going to go through every single card, not going to run down every single card in the deck, but there is a Deprive in this list, which is pretty spicy. The counterspell that makes you bounce a land, so of course that works great with Mystic Sanctuary. Playing Spell Quellers and no Hero of Dominaria in this list, so very interesting.
I think Jace is the one you want. Like, Stoneblade is trying to be cheaper, right?
Yeah. No, most certainly, but it's just interesting because I honestly haven't played Modern basically since Pioneer came out, so it's really awesome to see how these decks over the bannings and over the last couple of months have really kind of tuned to try and fight the new Titan metagame, basically.
Sure.
So very cool stuff. In second place, oh my, what is this? Ad nauseum? All right, so do you know what might be prompting folks to try ad nauseum in Modern nowadays?
Yeah, Adnos is good because of Thassa's Oracle now.
Sure. Yeah.
You can there's a combo in Modern of if you have like an Unlife, Phyrexian Unlife, or an Angel's Grace, you can cast one of those, and you can play a Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah.
And then with Thassa's Oracle's trigger on the stack, you can cast the Spoils of the Vault and name a card not in your deck, any card that's not in your deck.
Sure.
Your entire library will be exiled, and when the Oracle trigger resolves, you win. Even if they kill the Oracle, nothing. You
That's
just can't,
pretty hot.
yeah. So Spoils, like, it is a 3-card combo, right? But in this scenario, 2 of them cost 1 mana and the other one costs a third. And the fact that, like, they're already combo cards with Ad Nauseam puts you in a spot where, you kind of want to be playing them anyway. So I think that's actually just kind of a deck to look at going forward.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually when I first downloaded Moto, that was the first Modern deck I ever played, was the traditional one with Labman and everything. So that's pretty cool that deck's starting to pop up. And then we have in third place, this is green-red. Is this just green-red ramp, basically? It's
Ponza. It's like the natural evolution of Ponza. It's not like there's not
there's
there's not the Ponza cards, right? There's not the land destruction cards, so it's like a green-red beatdown, but it's still a 4x Magus of the Moon deck. Like, you are a Blood Moon deck. You are like a Arbor Elf, Utopia Sprawl, and a big red and green things deck. And that's, that's a deck we've seen in Modern for a while. They've updated with some new cards, and that's, that's cool. That, you should be trying new stuff in the deck, and it looks like a good deck. It looks like playable.
Oh, yeah.
I have played against this deck with Amulet Titan, and I can tell you it is a nightmare to just play against the 4x main, 4x Magus of the Moon in the main deck. That's not good. Yep.
Yeah, and the new card here is Klothys, God of Destiny. So the fixed Deathrite Shaman, if you will.
Sure.
And then in fourth place, we, of course, you can't talk about a Modern tournament top 8 these days without a Azusa Lost But Seeking /Time Titan deck.
Yeah, Amulet Titan. This is just stock Amulet Titan now. This is what it looks like now. It's very powerful. Super good deck, but I think people are getting to the point where they can beat it.
Yeah. Do you think moving forward that it's going to start to see a downtick in play, or?
I don't think it's going to downtick necessarily. Like, it's still very clearly tier 1, but it's just not tier 1 by itself. Like, there's just other decks you can play.
Gotcha.
And there are decks that are good against it for sure. Like, I would not want to see this Ad Nauseam deck as a Titan player. I think you have almost no game there. I mean, maybe they have a bad draw. Maybe you have a quick draw. Like, it's certainly possible to win, but there's a lot of stuff in Titan to go really bad against Ad Nauseam, where it's like, you pack for your Titan, think you have a kill, they cast Angel's Grace, and now you die to your Summoner's Pact trigger on the upkeep. Like, yeah.
That's rough.
Yep.
So Amulet Titan got 4th and 5th place in this tournament. In 6th was another one. So, and then we had in 7th place was Death Shadow. So this looks like to be just good old-fashioned Jund Death Shadow.
Traverse Shadow. I mean, that's just a Modern deck. It's been a Modern deck for years at this point. It's just good.
Yep.
Doesn't seem like there's any, particular tech, but it's always going to be playable in Modern.
Absolutely. And then in 8th place was another Amulet Titan deck. So,
yeah, so I think that's actually like a pretty good depiction of where Amulet Titan is, right? Like, there's 3 in the top 8, but every single one of them lost their first round of top 8 because they ran into the players that, were on a roll and prepared for their deck.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that was actually, like, I played an IQ this weekend. That was my experience was, I beat a lot of players with it. I make it to the top 8, and then I played against somebody who was really prepared for my deck. They had a lot of stuff ready for me in the post-board games, and they crushed me.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think that the Adnos deck looks pretty disgusting.
I think that's something people are going to need to start exploring going forward.
And then the
I
last
was
deck,
actually talking to someone else. I think Thassa's Oracle really needs to see more play in Modern. I think that card, like, we're just finding in Pioneer that it's way better than it looks.
yeah.
It's just a really cheeky way to get free wins, I guess you could say. And, I mean, that's real. That is definitely, something people need to experiment with more.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the card's very, very powerful. I mean, any card that says you can win the game for 2 mana definitely should at least, take a look at.
Yep.
So ninth place is the last deck we're going to talk about from the Modern Challenge here, but ninth place was a very sweet. I mean, it's just basically Blue Moon, but I am really, I'm really intrigued by this deck. I always love these kind of strategies, whether it's the Kiki Jiki version. This is not. This is just Snapcasters and Thing in the Ices with a couple Blood Moons. There's a Ral Is It Viceroy, which I'm a fan of that card. Just one Narset Parter Veils, but this deck is, I mean, it's sweet. I definitely like these kind of decks.
Oh, this is one of my favorite decks in the history of Modern. I love this deck.
Oh yeah.
I played a bunch of like when KCI was legal, I was playing a Thing that has Blue Moon deck, and it was one of my favorite decks I've ever played. I think it's really good. Phoenix became like the kind of evolution of that deck after and became a better version of it. And it, kind of faded away, but I do think that, for the time that it was there, it was one of the best. I loved playing it, so I'm happy to see it do well again.
Yeah, it's same. I used to play it back in the day. I guess right before Jason the Mind Sculptor got unbanned, and
Sure.
one of my local buddies was having success with it. And he's like, "Hey, you should play it." So I played it, and it was pretty sweet. The last thing I just want to touch on the Pioneer preliminary real quick before we in the cast. Just talk about the 5-0 list and then a couple of the 4-1 lists. The 5-0 list was Spirits, so Blue-White Spirits, Brazen Borrower, the Eagle, Mausoleum. I mean, it's stock. They're playing 4 Thassa's Intervention, though. So what do you think about this new, not new, but the tech for Thassa's Intervention in this deck?
I like Thassa's Intervention. Spirits always had this problem of, when its curve worked out, it was really powerful, but sometimes it just got outcarded.
Yeah.
And it's really nice that, that they found a way to, still do their tempo plan, they still do their counterspell, but they, have a grindier card for grinding matches when they need it. So I like that invention, I guess.
There you go. Yeah, it definitely seems like a headache for Control, because that's something we didn't have to plan for. It was pretty much just like their Spell Queller was really the main thing, but now this Thassa's Intervention is not only a counterspell, but also a way to just drag them back into the game. So it's rough.
Some fine lords too. Just seems like a good card.
Kind of helps too, because now you don't have to, might not have to play Bant, because this kind of serves the role as Coco. So obviously it doesn't
definitely not as good as Coco, but getting the better mana is real. So
yeah.
Could be relevant.
So then the 4-1 we had Inverter of Truth combo. Nothing really crazy about this deck. I mean, in terms of just being different, it's only playing 1 Omen of Seas, which sure. The 4-1 also was Inverter, and then the one below that was a blue-white, basically blue-white, mono-white Devotion deck, I guess, is a convoluted way to say it. But yeah, Heliod with Ballista. They're playing Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, Teferi, Time Raveler, and Ojutai's Command. So
Ojutai's Command is a nice one. Get back Tomic, get back Draven Inspector. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, very, very good tech. Very interesting tech, too. So, yeah, is there anything that you want to talk about before we call it a cast?
No, man, nothing in particular here. Just, happy you had me back on again, and, yeah.
Absolutely, man. Anytime, we got Indy this weekend. I'll be there. You're obviously going to be there. I will have some of the Control Freak stickers with me, so if you see me at the event, I'll have those in my backpack. So just come up, say hi to me.
Sure.
But yeah, if you want to say where folks can find you on the internet, and then we'll call it a cast.
Yep. I mean, I actually got to write for Star City this weekend, so if you want to
Nice.
check out my article, there's an article on Star City about Blue White. So it would be cool if you guys could read that. Would really appreciate it. Get the hits for me.
Yeah, if you want to send that to me, I can put that in the show notes too.
Sure. And then, as always, you can find me on Twitter at A22Yen. Always happy to answer questions on Control there. I think if you follow me, you'll see that I'm answering questions about people have about decks or whatever all the time. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And again, thank you for being on. I do appreciate it. It's always fun to talk Control with you, and especially you've been on a tear recently, so keep that up.
Yeah, it's been a good run for sure.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, everybody, thanks for listening or watching. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to hit that like button if you dig it, and the subscribe if you really enjoyed it. And again, shout out to the sponsors, Solitary Pro. Their information will be in the show notes below. And if you really enjoy the podcast and all my other content, make sure to head on over to patreon.com/LesAlex and consider becoming a patron over there. And the podcast is going to be on all the podcast apps. And it really does help if you go on over to Apple Podcasts, give a 5-star review. It helps the analytics and all that stuff over there. But yeah, I'm streaming now 4 times a week. So I'll be streaming Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, starting at 10 p.m. Central Standard Time. So check me out on Twitch. All that information, though, will be in the show notes. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening. Everyone, have a great night. And remember, be kind to one another. Have a great night.
See you guys.